This is an area of our society that needs more help from more people, and it's only getting worse. The numbers are only getting higher with kids coming into care. And it's certainly not working the way it is. We need an all hands on deck approach, and that's simply what I'm trying to communicate to you within this video. Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, welcome. My name is Kate. We do mom life together, and I talk about living with faith, purpose, and intention. If any of that interests you, I would love to have you subscribe. We also talk a lot about foster care, and this is a video I've tried to film twice, and maybe it just wasn't being portrayed right, so God was preventing me from, like, the first time my mic didn't work, the second time Rosie woke up halfway through and then was like picking her nose, so I wasn't gonna put that on the internet. This video is all about the biggest problems in our foster care system. And I want to preface this by saying I don't believe complaining changes everything, and this is not a video meant to complain. But this is a video meant to bring awareness and hopefully inspire others to action. And that is my whole purpose of sharing what I think are the biggest problems within the foster care system. I know you can't comment on this, which kind of sucks, but I will put an Instagram post that goes along with this video. And if you want to come on over and comment there, I would appreciate that. And let's get this dialogue going, because action is what it's going to take for change to happen. And people that care and people that are willing to speak up about things like this. I fully believe that. Again, this is not a complaining video. So let's get right into it. So I've worked in the foster care system as a foster parent for almost 5 years now, and the biggest thing I've realized is I have zero control, which is really frustrating for somebody who wants to create an impact. I can create an impact in individual lives, and that fulfills me deeply. I've cared for 11 kids, we've adopted one, and I know I've made a positive impact in all of those children's lives, and hopefully most of those families' lives as well, because a lot of our kids went back to be reunified. However, as a system as a whole, I have no control. I have no control over how cases get handled and all of that. So to start, a system designed for broken families is never going to be perfect. God never intended our families to function the way that they're functioning in today's society. Families are more broken than they've ever been. Our culture is rampant with addiction and mental health issues, and it just seems to be getting worse and worse and harder for these kids, and these numbers just seem to get more astronomical. Like, you research some statistics and see how many kids are in care and how many come in, I just Google your county, your city, wherever you live, and see what the statistics are. You'll probably be shocked. Brings me to my first point is people with education but not necessarily experience in child welfare are the ones making the major decisions. So the foster care system, I believe, is filled with too many people and too many blanket statement rules. And in saying that, in theory, you would think extra people would be good for the welfare of the child. But in my experience, I found there's always somebody to pass the blame to or pass the buck to, or somebody else is going to take care of this or somebody else is going to take care of that. That what actually should be happening in a case to be in the best interest of the child is not often happening. Again, in theory, more people to help should be a better outcome, but I have found that not to be the experience. People change roles often. People come in halfway through and then have a different idea of what the case is like. Social worker burnout is really high. Like, one of our kids had 5 workers, and that's just insane to me. They weren't with me for that long, so to have like 5 workers in that amount of time is just nuts, because where are the best interests? And I'm not trying to place blame on social workers here. There's some amazing, fabulous, wonderful social workers who are doing great things, but I also think there's some that it's just a job, or they become burnt out to, they have to turn a blind eye to the hard stuff in order to function, because secondary trauma is real. And I can imagine having to see and experience what for us, we have 1, maybe 2 foster children at the home at a time. They've got 15 cases. They're dealing with 15 families, all the hard stuff that comes along with that. So social workers are to be commended and praised, but I just wish that some social workers, once they've been burnt out and they're not being the most effective for the kids, that they would step back, because I think there are some problems that lie in there with too many people involved. And then also too many rules. So our government likes to place blanket statement rules over how things are supposed to happen. But the problem is kids come into care for a variety of reasons: abuse, neglect, mental health issues, parenting capacity, poverty. Like, there's so many reasons kids come into care. There's no way blanket statement rules can apply to each family, each kid, each situation. And that is really frustrating. For example, one of the rules is kin is always the best option no matter what. But kin does not have to be family. Kin can be anybody who has a relationship with the biological parents. So that can be Emma's bus driver. Honestly, who qualifies as kin is way too wide in my opinion, and I don't believe that that is always the best option. I believe attachment is the best option. I think kin, true kin, definitely when you keep kids in their family, that is the best outcome. But let's put an example out there. A child who has been in care for 2.5 years with the same foster family who wants to adopt them then gets moved to a stranger because they're kin. There's no relationship, there's no attachment, there's no, I just don't see that as the best interest of the child. Like, I believe that kin should have been involved through the foster care process. And I mean, I know I've never been in a kin situation. I am speaking from the foster parent side, but I have heard story after story after story where this blanket statement law of kin is the best for the child. And I'm sorry, I don't agree with it. I think there needs to be some reform in what is actually in the best interest of the child. Kin is not always the best interest of the child. There's been situations I've heard of where the kin allows them to see their parents who are big safety issues, who they're not supposed to be having any contact with, that they're then exposed to drugs and abuse because their family, the kin is family, so they're letting the biological parents see the child when they're not allowed to. But because there's that family relationship, that happens. Like, it's too complicated and nuanced to say kin is always the best option. And that's what I mean by too many blanket statement laws. There's lots, but that's the main one. The next thing is timeline and extensions, and I want to be very sensitive when I say this. I believe that parents should have a good amount of time to get their lives together, to get their children back, to be reunified. I 100% believe in that. There are struggles and obstacles that you or I have never had to face that they have to face and overcome. And if they're willing to face them and overcome them and get the support and get the help, then I am right there beside them, championing them on, and I believe they should have an extended amount of time. But there's these laws that are put into place for timelines for the best interests of the child. If we're at the year mark and the parent is doing just enough to get more time, but not actually enough to make major change for the child, I don't agree with that. I believe that the child should get a shot at a good life. And I want to be sensitive when I say this because I've never had to overcome some of the struggles and obstacles that many biological parents with kids in care do have to overcome. So I can't speak from their perspective or their experience, but there has to come a time where the child's needs are taken over the biological family as a whole in order for them to have a shot at a future, because so much of what we see in foster care is cyclical. Kids are in care, their parents were in care, their grandparents were in care, their siblings all have kids in care. Like, so much of it is cyclical. I just believe there needs to be a stronger cutoff point as to when the best interests of the child are taken. How can we give this child the best future? How can we not repeat some of these same things that have happened with generations past? So again, trying to be sensitive, but this is just my perspective. I think timelines and extensions, I think timelines need to be followed and extensions need to be given in only certain circumstances. But from what I've seen is, it doesn't matter if mom hasn't showed up for 6 months, she starts showing up again and she's been to 2, she gets another 6 months to try. And then the child becomes more attached to the foster, possibly future adoptive family, and it just makes things complicated. Again, I'm not saying, I don't want anyone to think I'm not advocating for reunification. I 100% believe in reunification. I think that is best for the child when the family unit can be healed and restored and come back together. But so often that is not the case, and I just think there needs to be a more black and white definition of what is best for the child. The next big problem I see is foster parents need more support. It didn't take long for me to become a foster parent to realize how hard, lonely, and isolating this journey is. There's some people within community, they have lots of foster parents around them. You know, if you go to a big church who really advocates for that, you are so blessed to be in that kind of community. I am not. I go to a large church. I've started a support group at my church, but there's still, from the size of us, we're still a relatively small group. And, you know, nobody in my immediate circle are foster parents. I mean, some are now, but, you know, going through it, didn't have that support, and it was hard. And there's so much in foster care that there's so much of a learning curve, especially those first couple years of being a foster parent. I don't think foster parents get enough support. And in some ways I agree, because if you look at everybody involved in the foster care system, theoretically and hopefully logically, the foster parent is the most stable of all of those people, right? They're not the one needing the most support. They are the ones giving the stability to the system. But that doesn't mean foster parenting is easy. And I think there should be a lot more support from our agencies with foster parents. And often when there's budget cuts, and there always is with government, right? Foster parents are the ones that get affected. For us, we had a huge budget cut a year or 2 years ago, and we completely lost our resource workers. So now our resource workers are also children's workers, which in some cases are fine. For me, like, I'm a relatively easygoing foster parent. I don't, you know, have to contact them a lot. But there are certain situations where it's a huge conflict of interest, that how can that one worker advocate for the child's needs and the foster family's needs the same? Like, there's sometimes where it's just a huge conflict of interest. When those budget cuts happened, we also lost our support groups for a year, so we had no support. And now they've brought them back, because I believe there's some great workers who are advocating for foster parents, but often we're the last ones to get supported. Just needs to be a level of ongoing support, I believe, for foster parents. I think some agencies do this better than others, but I talk to foster parents all over the world, the States, Canada, Australia, UK, like, I've heard varying perspectives on this, and the one thing that I get often is that they feel like they're lacking support. So if you are a foster parent, you're looking for support, we do have a foster parent support group, so I'll leave that link down below. Touched on this point, I just want to bring up again, is reunification versus best interest of the child. I just think there needs to be some major reform there, because when the focus is only reunification, I've seen so many kids slip through the cracks where they get returned and then they end up back in foster care. I believe in reunification, but I don't believe that reunification limits should be so low. Like, foster parents, we have to jump through hoops in order to care for these kids, and a biological family, like, their requirements are often quite a bit lower. So we see kids bouncing in and out of care, put them through the trauma of removal and then access visits and then going home and then getting removed again. I just don't think these bare minimum requirements are doing justice for the children. I believe in reunification when safe to do so 100%, but I believe the standard should be the same as it is for foster parent, or that there should be more ongoing support. And again, I'm not super, like, I don't come from that perspective. And it's hard for me to say, like, yeah, like, of course they should have a job and a house to get their kids back, when that's not the requirement. Like, but I just think we're setting up the biological families to fail when we make the bare minimum requirements so low. I don't know. It's a tricky one, because I do believe kids belong with their families when safe to do so. But I don't think, like, not having a job, for example, I don't think putting them back into a situation where there's just not enough stability is the best thing for them. I still think that them staying in foster care and having regular visits with their parents while they get a job and while they actually do all of these things, I think kids get returned too quickly often, and that's just the way the legal system works. And that's the requirements that are put on biological families. but like the requirements put on foster families is so high. I just wish there wasn't such a double standard. The last big issue, and this is not my area of expertise, but just from what I've seen, is teens age out without support. I know there's a lot of extended programs now, but so many teens age out without support. I was just listening to this podcast. I can't remember where she was located, but she runs this coffee shop called The Cracked Pot, where she hires teens that age out of foster care. She does there's a whole program where they become like a family. And I just wish there was more people doing things like this, because so often kids age out and the likeliness of them to end up being addicted, incarcerated, involved in human trafficking are so high. It's so sad. I think this is probably one of the hardest areas to change and help, because teens have a voice and opinion of their own, and they're dealing with raging hormones and often a lot of trauma when they've aged out of the foster care system. And I think they often will even resist support when trying to do so, but there's just so many kids that then, in the next couple of years, as teenagers themselves, end up with their kids in the foster care system, because I feel like there's just not enough programs that support them. And again, I think this is the hardest area to change, but it's just something I want to bring awareness to. If you have a heart for teens, being a mentor, getting involved, just wish more people would be involved and do things like this amazing woman was with the Cracked Pot coffee shop business, where she only hires kids that don't have a strong family support system, and she helps them through those formative years. Like, those are such important years, transitioning from a teen to an adult and trying to do life on your own. And when you don't have support to do that, it's so hard. Like, I got married at 21. And I still called my mom all the time for things. And I consider myself a pretty independent person. But I always had that person to call. And so many of these teens don't. So if you have a heart for it, I would just love if you would get involved. Is how do we help? And I don't want you to think that I'm throwing any of the people that work within the foster care system under the bus. Not at all. It's the opposite. I'm commending them, because this is, from my perspective, this is not easy work. Whether you're a judge, a lawyer, a CASA, a foster parent, social worker, like, none of these are easy roles. I commend everyone involved for sacrificing their comfort to work within the foster care system in no matter what capacity. But this is an area of our society that needs more help from more people, and it's only getting worse. The numbers are only getting higher with kids coming into care. It's certainly not working the way it is. We need an all hands on deck approach, and that's simply what I'm trying to communicate to you within this video, that I think as a society, we all can help in one way. Jason Johnson has a book. He's a big foster care blogger. He has a book called Everyone Can Do Something. It doesn't mean you're necessarily called to foster or to adopt or to be a social worker or to be a judge or to work directly within the system. But you can be a mentor or a volunteer, or just be willing to have a conversation with some of these kids and get involved and learn about their world. Like, I just believe if we had a more hands-on deck approach, we would be able to create so much change, so much positive impact. This might be hard for you to hear, but I'm okay with that. And I'm okay with it not being a popular message. But if we stopped living so much for comfort and started living and actually caring about other people and living sacrificially the way that Jesus did, I think the world of foster care would look a whole lot different. Here's some tangible ways you can help. Be a foster parent. If you have ever felt that calling, I believe that calling is on your heart for a reason. Pursue it. Become a foster parent. It's the best thing I've ever done with my life. It's not been easy. There's definitely been some really hard days. There's been days I want to give up completely, but it's been the best thing I've ever done with my life in so many facets. And you can watch some of my other videos where I talk about that. But consider becoming a foster parent. Support a foster parent. Like I said earlier, we need help emotionally, spiritually, physically, financially. Foster parents need help. If we're willing to step into the ring and do these hard things and help and work within this broken system and help these kids. But it is so much easier when we have someone bringing us a meal when we get a newborn with no notice, or when our teenager has run away, being somebody, just calling and being a listening ear. Support a foster parent. That helps in so many ways. Be a mentor to a foster youth. These kids need strong, solid, stable friendships in their life. Mentoring, it's so important. Volunteer with your agency. You can be a volunteer driver. You can play with kids. They have family visitations where you can just help facilitate play between the child and their family. Offer to cook for a bio family. There's a lot of supports that bio families get, so offer to volunteer with the bio families. To see these families restored and see these kids get out of care, help. A lot of these parents don't have positive role models as parents and don't know how to parent, and that's why their kids are in care. So there's so many ways you can volunteer with your local agency. Become an advocate, a CASA or a GAL, where these are actually appointed advocates that are allowed to go to court to speak up for the child's best interest. We don't have that program here in Canada, but I know most of the states do. So look into becoming a CASA or a GAL. I'm not sure exactly what CASA stands for, but it's court appointed something advocate, I believe. And then GAL is guardian ad litem. So they're basically the same thing, I believe. Like I said, we don't have that program here, but there's tons of states that offer that program. So you can be the voice. You can be with that child. Not only are you able to mentor them, but you're able to speak up for what's best for their future, when sometimes the social workers and the judges and the lawyers are not making the best decision for that child. You can be their voice. You can be a huge advocate, because the foster parents, they look at it as a biased voice. They aren't allowed to have that say in court. So that's a very special role that you can play to help the system. Become a worker and do your job in the best interest of that child. Don't let your cases become just another number. See them as names, see them as people, see them as lives that can forever be changed. And again, I say this very cautiously. There's so many amazing social workers I've dealt with, but there's definitely been a few that I'm like, this is time where you need to remove yourself from this job because you're not doing it for the best interest of the child. So become a worker and work with the best interest of the child at heart. Practice self and soul care as a worker. Maybe you are a worker who's feeling burnt out or feeling like your kids are just becoming a case number because you're so overloaded. Practice soul care and self-care, and put those strategies in place and those systems in place so that you can do your job well. Emotionally support a worker. Just as foster parents need support, social workers need support. And there's only so much in both roles that we can say confidentiality wise, but just know that social workers have to deal with really hard things all day long, every day. Not only with their kids, but with the families, with the foster parents. Not all foster parents are easy to work with either. Emotionally support a worker. Offer to take them out for dinner and just, let them cry or vent or do whatever, but emotionally support a worker. If you've got a worker, social worker in your life who works within child welfare, then be there for them. Have an all hands on deck approach in your community when it comes to problems. Don't just ignore them or complain about them. Get on, I see so many Facebook groups in my area where they just complain about all the addiction problems that we have. Sitting on Facebook and complaining about things doesn't get anything accomplished. So see how you can get involved and just stop ignoring and complaining and actually be helpful to your community. There's so many ways you can help to solve problems. Lastly, educate yourself about foster care, why kids come into care, and reframe the way you talk about it. I hear, and before I became a foster parent, I had this experience as well, but just looking at the biological families as the scum of the earth and they've done all these horrible things. And don't get me wrong, there's some evil situations, but for the most part, these are just people who need help, need love, need support, need somebody in their corner. So just become more educated about foster care and reframe the way you think and talk about it. Foster care is a need. Obviously, these kids need protection, these kids need help, these families need help, but just become more educated so you're not speaking about it with a bias one way or another. It takes a village. I blog and make videos about foster care and the orphan care crisis because I am so passionate about it, and I believe that there can be major change if we all just cared a little more. I believe the saddest thing in the world is a child growing up without a family. That is just heartbreaking to me to even think about it. And that's not the thousands of orphans that are living in third world countries that have been taken from their family because of war or poverty, AIDS, you know, social orphans. There's so many there, but there's so many in your own backyard, and we often have no idea until we allow ourselves to step into this world and get involved. You may not be called to foster or adopt, but everyone, and I mean everyone, can do something to help the orphan care crisis. Kids deserve it. Our next generation deserves it. So I just want to ask you today, what can you do to help? Thank you guys so much for watching. I know today's video was a little bit more of a sticky subject and maybe not be popular, in my opinions, not be popular, but I just hope that you see my heart behind creating a video like this is I just want to see more kids and loving families. I want to see less orphans. I want to see our world in a better place. And I think we all have the responsibility and the ability to do something about it. So thank you for being here. Subscribe if you're new, like this video if you liked it, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.